So then we can move to this topic, observation in groups. And that's when we're talking about in groups, we're just talking about, like, say, in this context is you can cluster or you can put the observations into different schedules. And we're trying to look at within each group or within each schedule, how can we do the modeling? And of course, since we're talking about hierarchical modeling, we're trying to probably borrow information across the groups. So that's the goal. So if you don't worry about like a cross-group borrowing information at all, you can just get 4 different normal models and then put everything as a separate sample and then model things separately, right? But we might want to like use, say, information about schedule 1 to make inference about information about schedule 2. Especially we see that they're pretty similar to each other. So that's why the approaches to modeling will be different compared to what we've been used to doing, all right? So observations can arise in groups. We just saw like ratings of dramas or different schedules, but for example, other examples include students' test scores from multiple schools. Okay, so the schools are the groups. Okay, so you have people in the schools and then their test scores may be different. And also if you have different genres of movies, you may have ratings, so all that can be considered as observations in groups. And then we start using this label Yij, where J is the group index and I is the observation index within group J. Okay, so that's why when you're looking at the range of the value of index I, it goes from 1 to nj, where we use nj to denote how many observations in group J. Okay? So in the past, when we have yi, I from 1 to n, that's it, right? And now you already have separate groups going on, so we're trying to label it correctly. So special thing, I guess, to notice here is that when I is in this range, then we will know that summing over all of the nj will be n, okay? Because the sum of the group size will be the sum with the size of the total sample. Okay, so those are good things to keep in mind, and you might start to think already, well, how can we code all of that in terms of the modeling later? But it's good to keep track of like the index from where to where it goes to, and that will help you focus on the coding later as well. All right, so outcome is continuous, so we can use a normal model. So the two approaches that we know so far, I would say, is the first one, separate estimates. That's when you are just having a different mean, different sigma for each of the normal models, and then use normal everything separately. Okay, so that's equation 2. But you can also look at another approach where I labeled approach number 2. Well, I just don't care about different schedules. I just want to make inference for the entire sample. Then I can combine them. And then that means my index of I and j actually just reduced to I. Okay? And then I'm giving it a normal distribution with the same mean and the same standard deviation sigma. So think about this too. This too, I mean, we've seen a version of this in the past. So I want you to talk with your neighbors to comment on pros and cons of each approach, I guess maybe more specifically to the drama data that we have seen. Okay, like the structure, I mean the summary statistics as well as the density plots that we saw. So can you think of pros and cons of each approach here to the particular problem at hand? Okay, anyone, pros and cons of each approach, and maybe specifically in the context of the Korean drama rating? Okay.
I mean, immediately, like a problem with the second approach is that, like, from the data we've seen, it looks like there's differences amongst schedules. It just shows in each schedule. So, like, this model would like not adequately incorporate that observation.
Yeah. So from the plot, I guess especially. We see that even, I guess, schedules 1 and 2 are similar, but the other 2 are going to the other 2 extremes. Okay. So should we go with approach 1 then?
I feel like if you separate those distributions, there might be inherent relationships between different distributions. There might be some interaction between different features, and we might not be using that useful information to model.
Right. So approach 1, I guess, is a bit extreme in a sense that, well, yeah, I wouldn't say interactions between distributions, but more like what if, like, say, schedule 1 and 2, because we already saw that they're similar, right? So there might be similarities across distributions that we might want to capture. But then number one, your approach number one will be too extreme that you put everything separate. And approach number two will be the other extreme that you put everything combined. Okay. So since you know a little bit about hierarchical modeling now, you probably will think of, well, how to deal with that situation is use hierarchical modeling because we can get something in between of the two extremes. Okay? But I should mention that when we say something in between, there still can be many different versions of hierarchical modeling. Okay, so we're going to cover a particular one in class as a working example, but you're welcome to explore many other ways. And I should also mention that for approach one, so we know that for schedule 3, the Friday cases, right, it's pretty extreme, like very small, very low of the rating. But we also saw that there are only 3 dramas in that group. Okay, so then with small sample sizes, you might suffer for the inference. And sometimes you might wonder, okay, what is for extreme cases? I only have one observation in a particular group. Then I should mention that the frequentist approach wouldn't even be able to make inference about the uncertainty because you only have one observation. Okay, so here you can think of, well, number 3, I guess schedule 3 is a bit extreme, and we know that the doing separate inference for that particular group might suffer in terms of the inference accuracy. So this might be a good case where we want to think of, well, what if information about the other groups can help us make better inference about the group that we unfortunately do not have many observations. So that's another thing to consider.